Cool. So, hello everyone. Well, while everyone gets logged on and set up, I think I'll take a moment to introduce myself, let you all know what to expect in the next hour or so. So welcome everyone. For those that don't know me, I'm James Westwood. I'm the Senior Consultant with Harvey Nash, and I run the Leeds development practice. I'm partnered with Usman Shahid, Managing Consultant for our Newcastle office, and you'll also meet Matt Power. Matt's the head of the Midlands development practice, and he's based from our Nottingham office. Together, we've come together to bring TechSpace to life. This is the second in our series of bi-monthly events aimed at giving something back to our networks. A big part of what we're hoping to do is put on a great event, but also create that ongoing support network for taking your career to that next level. So with that in mind, I'd like to offer you access to our new Slack HQ as well, where you'll find the resources channel. I'll put a link to join in the follow-up email after the event. Please do leave any questions, useful links, relevant content on this Slack channel. Some good reading lists on there already from the previous event. Today's event wouldn't be possible without our sponsor, Harvey Nash. Harvey Nash, for those that don't know, specialise in technical recruitment across the world, partner with some amazing brands, think Channel 4, but companies of all sizes really. They run a number of tech events themselves, a weekly podcast called Tech Talks, and the famous CIO survey in partnership with KPMG, all worthwhile checking out if you've got the time. So on to why we're here tonight, the journey to digital leadership. You're all going to hear from 4 expert talkers with varied backgrounds. There'll be 4 short lightning talks, followed by the live Q&A. This part is reliant on your questions, so please send them through to us via the live Q&A function on Zoom as the event progresses, and we'll do our best to work our way through these all tonight. Any unanswered questions will go in the Slack channel, and we'll do our best to answer them all at some point in the coming days. We're hoping tonight's event meets its aim to help you on your journey and improves our understanding so we can better help our network of ambitious techies and in turn our clients succeed. I'll let Matt introduce the speakers in more detail. But first, I just want to say the biggest of thank yous to all the speakers, who I know you all live very, very busy lives and have given up your time to be with us tonight and make tonight a success. So thank you very much. And also a big thank you to you all for taking your time out of your day to be here. As promised, I'll pass you on to Matt Power. Look forward to meeting you all in the chat function as the event progresses. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. So I think my wonderful job this evening is to take you through, introduce, and I've got the quite easy job of just passing you between some great experts we've got from the industry. So first of all, let's hand over to Richard. So Richard, over to you, and for you to tell us about yourself and your journey to digital leadership.
Hi everyone, hopefully you can see my screen, and just to quickly introduce myself. So I'm Rich, I'm Chief Engineer at BJSS in Leeds, and at the moment I'm overseeing about 20 or so NHS digital projects, so it's pretty crazy. There's some COVID related stuff in there, so we're seeing a lot of action. Which is awesome. I'm loving it. It is absolutely incredible place to be. And before that, I was a software engineering manager at Zone. And before that, I was a principal engineer at Sky. And kind of being in tech and getting some kind of leadership position in tech was something that I was always really keen to do right from the beginning. I was really keen to influence other people. I was keen to share my ideas. I was keen to collaborate and see people grow, see products grow. And so I had always had this deep down that leadership was where I was wanted to be. But one of the things that we tend to forget is that it's not always plain sailing. And if you look at any of the big successes in business, and Steve Jobs is probably an example where he lost a crazy amount of money through some of his business enterprises. And there's other people that I really look up to who have seen a bit of failure, who have seen a bit of mess, who have seen a bit of, oh my goodness, that didn't go how I planned it to go. So the first thing I want to tell you is that if your digital leadership career is going exactly how you had hoped, maybe there's something missing. But let's explore what some of those might be, because it's not all bad stuff, it's good stuff as well. So this is an example of how I envisaged what success looked like in the digital space. That was going from the only dev of a startup and becoming a CTO. That was the pinnacle of what you could do, is build an amazing software as a service platform, see it succeed, and see thousands of people using it, whether it be something like Twitter. And I know that's quite extreme, but one of my friends from Sheffield, a chap called Joel Gascoigne, he actually created this startup called Buffer. And he's just down the road in Sheffield, where he's not anymore because his house is like right opposite Twitter's offices in California, because he has succeeded in this space. And you kind of look and think, oh, well, that's really good. That's what I want to do. But the reality is, if you do this, you're missing a bunch of steps. You're missing a bunch of learnings. And what you'll find is that a lot of these startups, they actually have to go back and learn some of these other things later. So even though their sales success is immediate, their online presence is immediate, the maturation process of being that leader and that leadership function within an organization at scale is something that very much you have to learn it. You're not just born with it. And I thought this was, oh, people can naturally just pick this up. And it's not so easy. And you see other organizations that struggle with this. I know at times DAZN struggled with it. And I think we're seeing right now companies like Monzo are even struggling with it, because they were just looking at success, and maybe the maturing steps in between is something that they had to go back to. So you know, I knew that wasn't very realistic, especially with some of the stuff that I was doing at the time. So I thought this was maybe the career for me. That I thought this was the path that everyone took, and this is really common. You see this all the time, where people are junior dev and they work up to dev and senior dev, tech lead, principal engineer, and then head of engineering or something like that. And I thought this is exactly what I want to do. You know, this is so sensible, so clean, it makes sense. I'm a techie, I'm growing in my career, I'm providing influence, I've got loads of engineering ideas, I can talk about architecture till the cows come home. I've got loads of strategy ideas of how a company is going to be successful with their tech. This is going to be the way to go. But it's not like that. And the reality is, when I got to become a principal engineer at Sky, I realized there was a whole bunch of skills that I was missing, because technical leadership involved lots of other really exciting things, like project planning. I didn't find that very fun, actually, but it's a really necessary skill. There's things like estimations, putting things down in spreadsheets. I used to get the other devs come up behind my shoulder and say, filling out another spreadsheet then, Rich. So it's frustrating, but they're important. Forecasting, do you have enough teams and budget to do what you're needing and wanting to do? Are you delivering, helping provide delivery dates? And within programs with other teams. So that's the whole delivery management aspect that comes into play as well. Then you have difficult conflict resolutions. Like, I thought I was quite good with people, and I enjoy it when people are happy, you know, I really enjoy that. But when there's a conflict, it tends to imply that somebody's maybe not happy. And when they're not happy, they're really not happy. And I was actually going to call this difficult people resolutions, but I realized that actually there will always be difficult people. And dealing with that is something that you need to, it takes so much energy. It really takes so much energy. It's like, can't you guys just get along? You know, times I've been in some almost like counseling session like scenarios where I've got to train people just how to work on the same team. And there's been others that have been more complex. So you have to do some of these things. You have to do pitches. Even within a large organization, what you'll find is you're pitching an idea to the organization. You're putting yourself out there and saying, buy into this. Deprecation planning, you know about some of that, moving from one tool to another, going and asking a whole myriad of people their opinion about things. But also similar to pitches, you've got things like asking for money. That was a really difficult one for me. That's like, you've got to put yourself out there with the pitch and say, spend your money. Going in front of the CTO of Sky and saying, I want 7 million quid for a project is not an easy thing to do. And you've got to be right about your number. You can't just say, yeah, 7 million, that give me quite a lot. You've actually got to give very good rationale. You've got to fight for it. And even for small amounts of money, you've also got to fight for that. So even right now, budgets are constrained where people are on furlough. How can I get more money for my devs when we've got staff furloughed? You know, that's something that you will have to fight an organization for. And if you like asking for money, maybe this might come a little bit more natural to me, but to you, sorry. But as a techie, that's like, oh dear, that's way hard. But you have to push yourself into it, and you have to give it your all. And it's not like you have to just be able to do this. You've got to be good at it. Because when I was thinking about the next grand software engineering title, I was thinking about the title and the glory and the fact that all the devs are going to love you and all the rest of it. But I wasn't actually thinking about, will I be an amazing head of tech? Would I be an amazing head of engineering? Would I be an amazing principal engineer? If you just want to be an average one, that's fine. You probably can do it. Yeah, because it's easy to say, oh yeah, I can probably do that. Yeah, I can probably do that. But to be good at that is to be really good at it. And that's what I feel our goals should entail very much. So to sum up, I've talked a bit. What is some of the advice I have for you now in where you are? Enjoy it. Enjoy where you are. If you haven't reached that next place on the ladder that you want to be, that's fine. But don't let your kind of desire to go to that next level hinder the amazing influence you can have where you are. If you want to be a leader where you are. If you want to lead 10 teams, be a leader when you're in a team of 2 or 3. And enjoying that will help you, it will help your life, it will help you be a content person and a positive person. Find out what you love. What do you love? Do you love filling out Excel spreadsheets with bunches of time put against them? You know, work that out, because if you don't, then maybe you might need to slightly adjust where you want to head to. Because if you want to be a head of tech, and Louise will probably tell you very, very much, you probably end up spending a bit of time doing that stuff. In fact, a lot. So do you want to spend all your time delivery, planning, budgeting, forecasting? Or are you about the tech? Because maybe the path is slightly different. And this is one for engineers. I find engineers really struggle with this because they're sarcastic because they think it's funny and everyone enjoys it. And it's not just about being sarcastic, it's about being positive, being a positive person, not always saying, oh, this particular tech's rubbish or that particular tech's rubbish or this didn't work. And we tend to do it in a jovial way, but some of these bad habits can stick with us. And so it's not just about sarcasm alone, but it's about things like bad habits in general. Be the person that people come to, and be the person that people love to come to. And this is what I'm talking about. If you're in your team of 2 or 4 or 5 or 20 or 30, if people start coming to you for either advice about the business, about the domain, about your opinion about something. I know people who are quite militant about time scheduling. They'd be like, oh no, I'll block off my time. But I know you need a certain amount of time management, but you also need people to really enjoy working with you. So these are some of the skills that you can really use to benefit you, that people will naturally pick up on and start really promoting you, in not necessarily in terms of your position, but in their mindset and their opinion of you. And lastly, be your brand, carry your brand. When you go about, who do you want to be? If you carry that with you, that's something no one can take away. No one can give you that but you. No one can take it away from you. And so therefore, you are making the best of your career by improving yourself. And those are the things that you can take to your next job interview, the next job interview after that, and next job interview after that. It doesn't matter what you're called. You can build the success within you. So that's my whirlwind trip. Sorry, I'm slightly over time.
Over to you, Taya.
Hi there, everybody. So my name's Taya. I'm the head of digital at Newcastle Strategic Solutions. I don't know whether many of you have heard of Newcastle Strategic Solutions before, but it's part of the Newcastle Building Society group. So we essentially run like an end-to-end savings operation for quite a few banks and building societies across the UK. So as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of complex digital product sets involved with that as well. I joined the organisation probably end of October, so I've been there maybe just over sort of 8-10 months now, and it's gone so quickly. And I just think it's because there's absolutely so much to do there. We're currently working on the digital and IT strategies, which I'm very heavily involved in, and part of my role is essentially to drive both of those departments forward, especially in the digital space. When I first joined the organisation, there wasn't a huge amount of digital presence there. A lot of the practices were happening, but there wasn't those dedicated roles. There wasn't as much dedicated capabilities as you'd imagine or expect from an area which was delivering such complex product sets. So essentially part of my role is to drive that forward. I think that it's been a really interesting journey so far. There's a huge amount of work to do. And I think that if I'd have known now what I knew when I first started, I would have probably been completely overwhelmed. But it's an amazing opportunity and a really, really fantastic place to work. So I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I think that Richard touched on some really, really good advice there. And, he touched on the fact that in some ways people think that it would be plain sailing to get to a leadership position. And I think that sometimes you have to put yourself in situations or do roles which actually, you don't enjoy, and you have to put yourself into situations which actually are really, really challenging in order to learn from them and know what to do best next time. So I'll tell you a little bit about my personal journey. So I did a computing science degree at Newcastle Uni. I soon realised that maths really was not for for me. So I changed that to an information systems degree, and it essentially swapped out the maths modules for business modules. And I think throughout uni, like I wasn't entirely clear on what I wanted to do. And it's not like, I think when you're at uni, you don't automatically think, oh, I want to be a digital leader, or I want to be, you know, like the head of digital, because even back then, I don't think like digital was really, you know, a huge thing. It was more very IT heavy. I knew that I really enjoyed like the web elements. I knew that I enjoyed kind of like the front end kind of coding, any sort of usability modules. So I kind of understood what I liked, but I still didn't really know what I wanted to do. I remember we did like a team project, and I was the leader in that, and I kind of managed the team through and managed the project, and I loved it so much. And I just thought, you know, this is something that I really enjoy and something that I'd like to do in the future. I think my team probably thought I was like a massive bossy boots, but we got to the end goal in the end, and it was really enjoyable actually. Whilst I was at uni, I did a placement year, and I went down to London and worked in Canary Wharf as a desktop technician for ASA during the Olympics. Now, I think that deep down, I knew that it wasn't like quite the role for me, and obviously I didn't really want to be sort of crawling around the floor like plugging cables in and messing around with wires. So I quickly realised that really wasn't for me. But so I left that after about 4 to 5 months and managed to go back to uni to finish my 3rd year. And even though like I knew that I didn't really like it, that experience was really, really valuable, and I'm so glad that I did it. And it was like an opportunity for me, being, you know, 20 years old, to go and live in London for a little while and experience industry, and experience what it's like to work, you know, in like a technology team. And I think that if it hadn't been for that opportunity, then I wouldn't have been offered a role which I was after uni. So when I graduated, ASA got in contact with me and offered me a venue team lead role and a service specialist role at St James's Park for the Olympic football. So I don't know if you remember, but at St James's Park, you know, they did the football. So I managed a group of about 20 to 25 ASA employees and volunteers. And I think that I was only like 21 at the time, so it was quite a big thing to do when you're just out of uni. So I was kind of dropped in the deep end there. But again, like, it was a role that I really enjoyed. And I think I enjoyed that kind of management aspect, and I enjoyed leading the team and kind of being in charge of like the kit and the servers, and like having that element of responsibility. So really that was a great opportunity for me to kind of dip my toes into the management aspects. Obviously that was a fairly short opportunity over the course of about 6 weeks while the Olympics was running. I quickly then moved on into a digital agency locally called Zebra. They no longer exist. That wasn't down to me. But yeah, so they focused heavily on like sort of website design, like domains, that kind of thing, SEO. And it was actually a fantastic opportunity for me, because it was advertised as kind of like a graduate opportunity. And it allowed me to have real exposure to a variety of different roles. So I was doing front-end development, I was doing account handling, I was doing project management, and that really allowed me to understand what I did and didn't like, and it gave me some exposure to kind of like that fast-paced agency environment, which I think it's a really important exposure to have that in terms of like a digital agency, so you can understand like that client, that kind of like client relationship, you can understand that fast pace. So I think that's really, really valuable experience to have. I then got a role at Virgin Money, which was sort of labelled as an e-commerce manager. Now the title didn't really reflect the role, and it was largely kind of sort of front-end development, and it kind of evolved over time into more of like a delivery related role. And I worked heavily with investments and pensions and credit cards. And you know what, I think that again, like financial services and working in like a heavily governance environment is also a very useful skill to have and useful to have on your CV, just because you know, I think it's quite challenging actually to work in a digital space in those kind of environments. working at VM was really valuable to me in the fact that I really started to see the involvement of digital, and I saw this digital team grow. I know that there was a lot of things that I personally thought I might have done differently or that I learned from, and I kind of saw like the growth of Agile and Scrum, which was really exciting, and I was quite, you know, heavily a part of the initial team of that, which was all quite new and exciting at the time. I think that for me, my learnings from VM would be that I was there for 5 years, and I think I stayed there a bit too long. It got to the point where I was sort of like quite desperate to grow in my role, and desperate to learn more and to step up and have that extra bit of responsibility. But, you know, it wasn't the right environment for that, and there wasn't any roles sort of suitable for me there. So I think my learnings from that would be that I maybe spent 18 months too long in that environment. I probably should have left a bit sooner. But my next opportunity really was, you know, the learning curve for me. I had a fantastic opportunity at Home Group as a digital development manager, whereby I introduced Agile into the organisation. I learned a huge amount about DevOps. I introduced that into the organisation. I created many new digital processes. I recruited a whole multidisciplinary team. I worked on the strategy, and I took responsibility solely for that kind of like digital team growth and that digital transformation piece. Worked really closely with Usman, who helped me sort of recruit my team. And, you know, that was a massive learning curve because it was a big step up for me. And, you know, the learning that I got from that was just so valuable. I faced many different challenges, and the fact that my role was so broad, it was, you know, I was so immersed in the detail. Someone's got a bug in this environment, or, you know, there's a problem with this environment, but to the point whereby I was also involved heavily with the strategy work as well. So that breadth of learning was just so valuable, and I'm really, you know, I'll always be grateful for that opportunity. And I think that if I hadn't have had that, then I wouldn't have been able to confidently go into the role that I'm in today and be able to, you know, understand what I'm doing in order to drive that team forward and build that strategy and understand, you know, who we need, what skills we need, what products we should be building, you know, what the end user needs, why we need to invest heavily in digital and IT, the areas that we need to invest in. So that really helped me. And I think that the knowledge that I received, especially like in the DevOps space, I didn't really know anything about DevOps before Home Group. And that was very much a new thing for Home Group as well. And actually to take those learnings into NSSL has been really helpful in kind of shaping our approach to DevOps as well. I think that overall, my recommendations would probably be to get involved in as many different things as you can. So even if it isn't directly related to digital or, you know, directly related to IT, like learn the financial elements, learn the commercials, get involved in recruitment, you know, get involved in interviews, try and look at the bigger picture. And especially within IT, there's so many different strands to it, even like, you know, the service elements that it might not directly affect you, but it's so useful to have that broad knowledge for decision making, and also to, you know, ensure that you can identify risks and you can identify opportunities. Without that bigger picture, sometimes you can be restricted in doing so. I think that one of my key pieces of advice would be to invest in yourself. Go to conferences, like invest in your personal development, understand technical trends, look at other organisations and how they operate to obtain that insight. Develop those professional relationships. You know, we're all very lucky that we've got LinkedIn to use, and it's a fantastic tool to stay in touch with, you know, professional people with a similar mindset or even a completely different mindset. Like, build those relationships. I've often found that, you know, if there's opportunities or role openings, or it's always like, oh, my friend knows someone who'd be great at this, or, oh, do you want to come and, you know, come work for me? Like, you know, I think it's a really useful tool to spend time, you know, building those relationships is really important. I think that another key piece of advice, which I am a firm believer in, is that you have to invest in your teams and you have to invest in people. And, you know, as Richard said, you can't ever be too busy to catch up with your teammates and understand who they are, understand what their drivers are, what their needs are, invest in their personal development, because essentially, if your team are unhappy or they're not, you know, working to the best of their ability, it's going to affect productivity, and it's going to affect how efficient your team will be and your output will be. I think that gaining that respect from your team is really important, because they're always going to be truthful to you, they're going to be honest, and they're going to work with you to produce the best results. And finally, I'd say probably aim high. Just don't shy away from any opportunity, even if you're a bit nervous about it, or you don't necessarily think that you've got all of the right skills, or you know, you look at a job advert and it says you must have 5 years in this. If you don't, you don't. I think that it's always best to, you know, best to go for an opportunity and get that feedback than not go for it at all. You know, just believe in yourself and really develop in those key areas and invest in those professional relationships. So I know that I've gone over time, so sorry, James, I've been given strict advice, sorry about that. But yeah, thank you for joining tonight.
Thanks very much, Taya. Over to you, Steve.
Awesome, thanks, Matt. So I'm Steve Westgarth and I'm the engineering manager of Boots. So I've had quite an unconventional journey to get to where I am now. Back in the day, I've always been a techie. So I've been programming since I was a kid. I published my first website when I was 12 on GeoCities, if anyone remembers that from Yahoo. I then learned classic ASP and started playing around that when I was in school. Went to university, studied computer science, learned ASP.NET. Then back in 2007, the iPhone came out. I love the iPhone. I'm a total Apple fanboy. So I started doing some iPhone development in 2008 as soon as we could. I didn't quite make day one of the App Store, but probably on day 2 or 3, I had an app which I was ready to publish, was really proud of that. When I finished my degree, I was really fortunate. I got to work for the university for a bit. So it was just at that point in time when the universities were introducing tuition fees. So we just introduced £3,000 tuition fees, and they were looking for ways that they could give students extra experiences in order to justify the reason for charging these extortionate fees. So we set up a unit within the computer science department that was all about providing students with industry experience while they were still studying. And I got the opportunity to start working with businesses in the local area, building websites, database applications, and general tools to help with business problems. So in the role that I took on at the university, I found myself doing all sorts of different things. I was project manager, I was salesperson, I was chief techie, I was solutions architect. And it really gave me a broad overview of lots of things that you need to be able to do if you're going to go into the technology space, but very much with a startup mindset. So we were working, with small businesses on applications that were, I guess, relatively small, but still fairly complex for what they were actually asking, and what they needed to do. So I did that for 2.5 years. And we actually grew a little business within the university. So by the time I left, we were turning over maybe £200,000 or £300,000. So it was actually quite significant. And I thought that I could do it for myself. So I left the university and I set up my own business. I kind of went freelance, started doing some contracting work, with different organizations, mainly agencies. And gradually over time, I started to build my own company, my own agency effectively. I didn't really set out to build an agency. It was just kind of the way that it happened. And I always wanted to stay very technology focused at that point. I was always the programmer, the techie, the solutions architect. And I found myself having to bring other people on board around me to do sales and to do marketing and to actually run the business. Over time, we started to grow and we employed some developers. And gradually I had to relinquish lots of the control that I had, as I had to let them run with things, and I couldn't do everything myself, and that was a really difficult thing for me to do. I found in the very early days I didn't find delegation particularly easy, and it was something that I definitely had to work on. So I ran my business for 4.5 years, and I was starting to find we got to a point where we had 10 staff. And I was responsible for effectively all of those staff's mortgages, and it was growing well, but it wasn't growing at the rate that I wanted it to grow. And it was really interesting listening to Richard talk earlier about the path to how you envisage things working. When I started my business, I kind of envisaged that 5-6 years later, we'd be turning over millions, and we'd I'd be CTO, and I'd be the next Steve Jobs, and that just wasn't my path. That wasn't the way that it was working out. So all the business was doing well. I kind of thought, do I want to be doing this in another 10 years' time, or do I want to find some other opportunities? So I was in a fortunate position where I actually sold the company to a larger agency who were in an interesting juncture themselves, having just won a contract with the European Union to deliver a multi-million-pound, multi-year contract to develop a system for the Seychelles government. So the agency were much bigger. They were used to working on much larger projects than what my company would have done. But at the same time, they'd never worked on a project quite as big as this, and they were looking for somebody with a technical background to go in and help them actually establish the teams and make that work. So that was a big step up for me. It was the first opportunity I'd really had to grow a team and to to really try and scale what I was good at and what I enjoyed doing. And so we did that. We started employing devs. We brought in Scrum Masters and product owners, and we ended up in a position where we had 6 or 7 Scrum teams working, fairly flat out to deliver this project for the Seychelles. I took the role of, principal engineer, principal architect, and also head of development latterly, as we started to expand some of the things we were doing and some of the practices into other projects that the company was undertaking. So being a typical agency, most of the projects they were doing were kind of waterfall. They did have some agile practices, I guess, in place, but it wasn't really working like that. And it was an opportunity for me to come from having run a small agile agency, into a larger agency that didn't really know how to work in an agile way. We started to introduce those practices much wider into the business, and it was very successful. So we got to the end of the Crimario project, and the next multi-million-pound, multi-year project simply wasn't coming downstream for the agency that I was working within. So there was an opportunity to potentially stay with them and I guess work on smaller projects again. But again, I was looking for the next step up. So around 18 months ago, I applied to Boots and became their engineering manager. Now Boots again are at a very interesting juncture, because historically they've actually outsourced all of their engineering to the likes of IBM, Accenture, and some of these large consultancy companies. And being honest, that's had mixed results. I think that if you look at perhaps the quality of some of the software that's produced, that's running Boots.com, it's perhaps not as high as we would like. It's also reliant on quite outdated technology, which has been around for quite some time. We have WebSphere Commerce, which is a commerce engine, which is, I guess, still supporting many large e-commerce platforms or many large e-commerce companies. But it's very difficult to deliver the performance, to deliver the experience that the company wants. And particularly as we move into a digital world, as we talk about omni-channel experiences, how we can augment a customer walking into a Boots store with their online experience, the technology isn't set up to really allow that to happen. So there's been a really unique opportunity to start actually building an engineering organization within a large corporate. And what I found is that, because coming from a small business background, a lot of the things that I would just be able to do in a small business, where you set something up, go and run after something and make it happen, you can't do that in a large corporate because of the different stakeholders you've got to take on the journey with you. And that's been really tough. But I think actually there's a meeting of minds where Boots recognises it needs to become more agile in terms of the things that it does. But actually, from my point of view, sometimes the level of rigor potentially that in previous roles that have been put behind the solutions, and in particular the architecture that's building them out, perhaps hasn't been as robust as maybe it could have been. So there's definitely a meeting of minds somewhere on that journey. So we're building out an engineering organisation inside of Boots. I'm now responsible for all engineering right across what's called the customer platform, which is Boots.com, and also the mobile app for both online pharmacy and online retail. We still have partners working with us. So I work very closely with the likes of Cognizant and Accenture, IBM, and others. But we now also have an engineering team in-house that are taking much more of a leadership role and actually owning the code that we're writing. And over time, I think that ownership will become even more embedded within the organisation, because people are really recognising that we as Boots need to own our code and take responsibility for the experience that we're giving to our customers, and we can't necessarily rely on on what partners produce without checking it. It's almost like checking homework in some ways, but setting the standards, the principles, and actually setting our digital journey in terms of how we as Boots want it to run. So that's kind of how I got to where I am. In terms of I guess advice and things that I would encourage everybody to do. I think some of the best advice I can really give is to read widely. I read an awful lot, and even now, if you haven't managed a team before, or you're maybe new to employing engineers or doing interviews, don't try and reinvent the wheel. Especially in the early days when I was starting my own business, I kind of thought I knew it all, and clearly I didn't. And actually, if you just go out there and find out what others have done, you can get a huge amount from that. I wanted to give you something to kind of take away from today. There are some books that I'll post in the chat later. Which I would highly recommend reading, but things like The Manager's Path, Turn the Ship Around, The Phoenix Project, they're all fantastic books, which I think for me as an engineering leader, have really given me a lot over the last several years. I would also say that you need to somebody said earlier on, be the person that people go to. Just be a nice person. You find that if you can help somebody else, then they will help you 10 times back. So, be that go-to person, be the person that, that's going to help everybody out, and make sure that you're doing everything you can to be the best you can be at the job you're doing. And I guess that links on to my next point, which is, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about finding delegation really difficult. Delegation is hard, especially when you have people around you who you aren't comfortable delegating to. So my strong advice would be to surround yourself with good people. If you're going into an interview and you're considering somebody for a role, you need to consider, can you work with that person and can you trust them to do what you need them to do? I've repeatedly found that if you surround yourself with the best people who are really good at what they do, they will plug gaps that you have in your own knowledge, and that will really help. And you can actually bounce off each other and learn, even if it might be reporting to you or working with you. It's really important that you get the best people around you that you possibly can, because then you can really depend upon them. And the last bit of advice I would give is to really just involve yourself in the tech community. Speak at conferences, put your name out there, write articles, share ideas, and generally help people as much as you can. I love going to conferences. I try to speak at 2 or 3 conferences a year if I can. I love getting involved with events like this. It broadens your network. It opens you up to a whole variety of other people that you just wouldn't get access to otherwise. And the more people that you can do that, the better. And I think it's been said by all of the speakers tonight, but build your brand, I think, is a really good, solid piece of advice. It's a really good way of making sure that you get the knowledge that you need, and also you'll give your knowledge to other people. Because I think as a community, as a tech community, we're much stronger together. So would massively encourage that. So that's my journey really. That's where I am now. It's interesting actually as I sort of look forward to the future, because I think I guess I'm maybe 11 years into my digital leadership career, and I guess I have a trajectory in terms of where I'd like to go. I don't know if it'll be as smooth as I hope it would be, but it's definitely not where I thought I would be when I started 11 years ago. If you asked myself 11 years ago where I'd be, I was going to be running my own company. I'd be the next Steve Jobs. I'd be your CTO of that organization. I wouldn't necessarily be working for a large corporate. Do I want to work for a large corporate for the rest of my life? Maybe, maybe not. But I think that there's definitely lots of opportunities on the horizon in the digital space. So maybe there's some opportunities in a director of engineering type role, maybe a CTO of a large organization. Who knows? But I guess you don't kind of pigeonhole yourself to where you think you're going to be. Be open to all opportunities and see where you end up. So thank you very much, and obviously very happy to answer any questions as we go into later into the evening. Cheers, Matt.
Thanks, Steve. And last but by absolutely no means least is over to you, Louise.
Hi, thanks everybody. I have to apologise. My internet connectivity seems to be slightly dodgy this evening, so hopefully it will hold up for the next 10 minutes. Hi. I'm currently a director at the Courts and Tribunal Service, and I took this role in February. And it's really exciting for me because we're creating a brand new internal software delivery capability. So the organisation historically has only ever gone out to third parties to have its software developed. So there's a real opportunity. We're opening digital hubs around the country. We're employing our own internal software delivery and putting all the processes in place. And I've never done that before, so it's really exciting for me. My role before that was as head of technology at Sky, and previous to that, it was head of software delivery at Leeds Building Society, where I also did a complete agile transformation. So a lot of what I'm doing at the moment in my current role is around a full digital transformation of the courts and tribunal service. So also really exciting. So where did I start? I started 28 years ago. For those who are struggling with your maths, I'm 51, you don't need to work it out. And I started as a developer. I was a developer at Marconi Radar, wrote software for the radar systems. I then moved on to Matra Marconi Space, and I wrote software for satellite systems. So really interesting stuff. It was a really long time ago, so most of the things that a lot of the other guys have been talking about weren't even a dream for people at that point. Open source, I remember that coming in and everyone being really worried about it. You know, it was a whole different world. It was also a world where, let's just say, women in the industry were really, really rare then. And so at Marconi Radar, there were girly calendars on everyone's desks. You know, this was just normal. And I look at the world and how it's changed in the time that I've been in the industry, and it's almost unrecognizable. It's although we still do have an issue with diversity in tech, there's nothing compared to how it was 28 years ago, let me just assure you. So I've worked on scientific software like radar, like satellites. I've also worked in the finance industry. I've also worked on the Heathrow Rail Express on software for that. I've worked at Sky, I've worked at NHS Digital. I like changing sectors. I like learning new things. I like bringing the things that were great about the last sector I was in to people who are still trying to solve that problem in another sector. And I think that's probably a theme for my life. I really, really like learning stuff and being challenged and new. And I've built that into my career, and I'm so lucky to have been able to achieve that. I've also lived in multiple countries. So the UK, yes, absolutely. I lived in the US for many years, and I ran a team based in China for quite a long time. I traveled to and from, so I was out a lot, but I didn't actually live in China. And I've also done lots of work for Italy and for Germany, and I really enjoy that too. So in my off time, I travel a lot. So a job that will pay me to go to China and spend significant amounts of time there is like a dream job for me. And I love that whole discovery around new cultures and learning more about yourself as a person by learning more about someone else. Also, what have I done? So I started as a developer, as I said, and I was a developer for 20 years. I loved developing. I didn't want to be a manager. I don't want to go into management at all. I wanted to be a developer. I wanted to do the tech. And I did do management, but I did management alongside the tech. So I was still very much hands-on. And I really enjoyed the management that I did, but it was in addition to the tech that I was doing, if that makes any sense. And I kind of got to a point, it was around 2008, and I kind of reached the end of my challenge technically. So there were lots more languages I could learn, but I'd already done lots of languages. So I'd already done lots of different changes. I just completed a project that was incredibly difficult. It was really high performance requirements. It was really no fault acceptable type environment. It was done in a really interesting way using new techniques, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And I got to the end of that, and it was boring because we'd done lots of great framework stuff, so it was just configuration we needed to do going forward. So great, but I'm not that interested anymore. And at that point, I couldn't find my next technical challenge. everything was too easy. I didn't want to write a screen that put some data in the database. It just wasn't, I couldn't find anything hard enough. So I took a year out and I went and did an MBA for a year just to try. I thought it would give me some time to think about what I wanted to do. In actual fact, it gave me no time at all because it was really, really full on. But it was very interesting to do. I also gave up my permanent job a week before Lehman Brothers went out of business. And a year later, there was no work anywhere. I'm just saying, it was a really business because all of the theories were being thrown out. It was in the middle of the financial crisis. Really interesting, but there were no jobs at the end. For the first time in my career, I was sending my CV out and I was hearing nothing, not from any agency at all, ever. And I kept having to check my phone number was right on it, that my email address was right. I was just hearing nothing. And I applied at that point for a contractor role at Yorkshire Building Society, and I did it directly with them. I was looking around at different organisations, and they really loved the fact that I was technical. And so they took me on into that role, and I ran a Java team, which was great because, you know, Java was my technology as well. So I could have sat and coded with them. So that was kind of fun. And they really liked having someone who actually really, truly understood what they were doing, working with them. But, you know, project management, I can do it, but I don't love it. I'm an agile person at heart. I started in agile early 2000s. And that's when I was living in the US, running a team based in China with my client in the UK. It was a great time to start experimenting with agile, but it worked really, really well. So and then after my MBA, after doing that project management, I kind of turned it more into what I actually wanted to do, which is always a great thing to do with the job. I always try and manipulate it a bit more into my areas of interest. And I moved on from there. I became a delivery manager at NHS Digital. I moved on to be delivery manager at Leeds Building Society. I was promoted while I was there to head of software delivery. Did a complete agile transformation there. That was fantastic to be able to do and really see the difference that brings, and really have to deal with people and all of those sort of resistance to things and really make it a positive experience. And I moved on to there, as I said before, to head of technology at Sky, which I also thoroughly enjoyed. So I guess I said I fought management, and I did. I really, really didn't want to do it. I loved being a developer, and I love being a manager now. So it's full of challenge. It's full of problem solving, which is what I loved as a developer, was that problem solving. I have that now. It's just, it tends to be people problems, and people problems are far harder than any technical problems I've ever had to solve. And also the feedback loop is slower. So as a developer, I'm going, it's not working, it's not working, it's not working, it works. And I get that positive feedback on a regular basis throughout the day. Whereas as a manager, that positive feedback is bigger, but it's less often. So there's almost a weaning yourself off of that wanting that regular positivity all the time. So main lessons I've learned in my sort of management, there were multiple stages I think of where it was just majorly different. You don't know if you want to manage other people until you have managed other people. It is a different skill that no matter how much you talk to people about, you don't know if you're going to enjoy it or not until you try it. I made all sorts of mistakes when I first started leading a team around not realizing that people are motivated by things that are not the same things that I'm motivated by. You know, basic things that I'm almost embarrassed to admit that I didn't know now. And then I think there's another stage, which is the first time you manage a team, which is not your technology set. You can no longer sit down and do the job that they are doing. And you have to learn new skills, and you have to learn new ways of working, and you have to trust them. You have to be able to have the right conversations. It's a really good learning experience for a leader. And then the first time you manage people who are managing other people, and you no longer have that direct impact on the cultures of the teams. that's a whole nother skill set again. So I think for me, those are the 3 huge learning areas. And I wanted to finish just by talking through what I think is really important, and that's about knowing yourself. And I mean by that, know what motivates you, know what you want. So for me, challenge, you might have gotten that from what I've said so far. I need a challenge. I want a challenge I've never done before. No one around me has ever done before. I am never happier than that. I love learning, not just in a work environment. I'm learning stuff all the time outside of work that's nothing to do with tech at all. I'm currently, because I'm very, very cool, right? I'm currently learning to play bridge, which is a card game for those who are younger, and is amazingly analytical and amazingly creative, you know, and I love that. And I'm getting my head into that in a big way. I've also done lots of stuff with astrophysics, lots of stuff in all sorts of different areas, and I just love getting my teeth into something that I don't know much about. I have to make a difference. If I can't stand back at the end of a month and know that me being there has made a difference, I can't stay at an organisation. It's really important to me. I'm also really awkward. If my manager tells me to do something and I believe it's the wrong thing to do, I will not do it. If it is the wrong thing, I'll have the conversation, but I will not do it. And I have that conversation at interviews. When I am going for a job, I tell them that about myself, because I will not compromise my values. They need to know that, to know whether or not they're willing to work with me. I don't want to start at an organisation where that is not acceptable to them. I hugely believe in quality built in, without question, every single time. I love Agile, but the reason I love Agile is the empowerment. I 100% believe in empowering people and letting them solve the problems, letting them make the most difference at work that they can make. Because then my job as a manager is so much easier, because they're bringing all of their passion and making all of the difference that they're capable of making. And I also hugely believe in taking opportunities when they come up. When someone says to you, we're thinking of opening up in America, do you want to go out and help? Hell yes, I'm there. You know, just, you know, take the opportunities. And the one thing that I would like to talk about, there's a couple of things that I am not interested in. I am not interested in the brand of the organisation I work for. If I was interested in that, I would not have left my job as head of technology at Sky, which when I told people that's what I did, their eyes would go a little bit wider and they'd be dead impressed. When I tell them I'm a director at the Courts and Tribunal Service, that does not happen. And that's fine with me. You know, that is not something that drives me. But for some people it is. And if it is something that drives you, look for that, look for those brands, look for those CV building brands, if you like. I'm also not interested in job title. I actually really don't care how many people I'm responsible for, how much influence I have, all of those things. I utterly don't care. I want to be able to get in and make a difference and have a challenge, and that's what I love. And I would do that with a team, you know, with just me, or I'd do it with a tiny team, or I'd do it with 250 people, you know, whichever that challenge is about and what that is. And because I know that that's what drives me, I am interviewing, when I go in, I am interviewing them to see if this is right for me. And I will only go and join organisations where I utterly believe I'm going to be able to do those. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Louise. And thank you to all of our speakers this evening. It's been great to hear from all of you, your own individual, personal, and the variety of journeys that you've all been on. And I know that I can't see everybody that is watching this, but from myself, yeah, applause for all of you for doing that. Usman, over to you to run our Q&A session. They are flying in thick and fast. There's a few been answered that other people might want an opportunity to answer, but over to you to run that.
Great, thank you very much, Matt, and thank you again to all the speakers. Last time we did this, we ran out of time, so I'm going to dive right in. Question for Richard, one that's resonated with the panel as well as a lot of the audience about Be Your Brand. Any tips on how you discover or define your brand? Is it something you found you've had to work on, or is it a reflection of your natural persona, would you say?
So there's a small amount of that, but what I found is find 1 or 2 technology areas that you're really passionate about. So for me, it was BDD at one point, and then microservices at another. And so what I then did was, whenever I was talking, whether it be in a larger meeting, a town hall, whether it be in conversations, or when talking with my teams, or talking with devs, or talking with management, if there was something I really believed that would solve the problem, and I was knowledgeable about that, I'd really talk about that, and I'd investigate that, and I'd spend a lot of time reading on that and spending out with other kind of thought leaders in that area. So finding out, so if it's BDD, for example, there are people like Dan North that are absolute experts, and just consume his content, reach out to him, have conversations, have debates. And then with microservices, it was similar as well. And I kind of became the microservices guy at Sky, and it really helped build the architecture that we were building. And then that you can really then carry with you, because that's something that is a skill that you have and a passion that you have that might not resonate as strong with other people, but it does with you, and it becomes that driver and that real focal point that keeps you going, to really carry on with that as part of your brand, as part of the skills that you're offering.
Great, really good stuff, and I think that'll resonate with a lot of the audience there as well. One that I'd like to ask everyone, or anyone that wants to jump in on this, as leaders, in practical steps, what are we doing to get diversity into our teams? And as an addition to that, it's a question I've been asked personally by clients, or something that's been raised, with not necessarily being in physical offices anymore, where you can't actually see the team. How are we maintaining a diverse workforce?
I think it's something that as an organisation, I mean, not only at Boots, but in other roles I've had as a tech community, we are really quite bad at. I was really fortunate to attend a talk which Michelle Obama gave a few years ago at WWDC, and she was talking very much about women in tech. And appreciate, here as a white man, maybe I'm not the right person to be evangelizing about this, but I think that as a community we need to look internally amongst ourselves and say, why is it that we have such a little diversity within our communities? It's something that is within our organisation. We have talked a lot more about as a result of Black Lives Matter. We've taken practical steps like renaming the master branch to the main branch, for example, and taking an active step to stop referring to blacklisting and whitelisting and those sorts of things within the organisation. I've tried other things in different roles where we've had things like all women shortlists and those sorts of things on interview panels. Hasn't necessarily worked as well as we would like it to, but I think for me, it's about actively talking about it. I sit here as a gay man, and I get to to talk to a lot of people who are in similar positions as me, who their voice maybe isn't heard. So I think we need to talk about it more, and I think that's what as an organisation we may be doing. But I think it's a problem that we have not only in our organisation, but I think across the community. It's something that we actively need to be doing more about. But unfortunately, I haven't got all the answers, and I doubt anybody has.
I couldn't agree more with that. And I think are we as diverse as we need to be? Not by a long stretch, but in all sorts of ways. I talk about women in tech, but also all aspects of diversity, race, religion, neurodiversity, all of those types of things I see as problematic in the workplace, and we do not have enough. I worked at one organisation at which nearly everybody was a keen cyclist. I wasn't, and neither was one other person there, but I played roller derby, so at least I had wheels, so I was acceptable. The other person there actually was also neurodiverse and actually had a really hard time. Now, there's something wrong in an office where everybody's got the same hobby. That means that the person that runs that office is taking on those people that have that hobby because he feels a connection with them. So that's just a sign that things are wrong, even if you would look around and say things look diverse. It's not always diverse. I'm also at the moment, I'm taking part in an upwards mentoring scheme with BAME members of staff within my organisation. I've only actually had one session so far, but really interesting. So I have a mentor who is out with a judge, and she goes around dealing with everything that the judge needs to have sorting all the time. So I'm learning a lot more about the organisation I work for, but I'm also learning a lot more and talking to her much more about issues for BAME people and things, and I'm opening my mind to that a little more, and that's really part of my growth too. But I think we need to reach out to people. I remember sitting there, I'm a woman in tech, so I'm the worst person to talk to about why women aren't in tech, because I don't know, because I'm in it. If I knew, I wouldn't be in it. And I used to be the worst person for saying, well, look, no women applied. How can I take a woman on? And I was really called on it at one Agile conference I went to. And it was a really good, it was actually somebody who identified as female, so had identified as male and been really quite famous as a Python developer in that scenario. And when she started to identify as a female, got really different reactions from people and really different relationships in. And she gave this amazing talk where she said, it's not good enough to stand back and say nobody applies. Go out there, tell them it's there, tell them you want them, tell them to apply. Don't just sit back. And I've really taken that to heart since. And, you know, at Sky, they have very definite plans, particularly around women in tech and other things. They measure it, they aim for certain things. It's the first time I've really seen that properly in action. And whilst I think somewhat there's some bad behaviours in there, overall there was a great outcome with what they achieved. And, you know, I'm in awe of what they did, and I hope to be able to build a similar type of approach where I am now.
Excellent.
Yeah, that's really great. I also have similar feelings around Sky, and it's about in its investment, isn't it? It's Sky very proactively invested in this and created initiatives, and it could be initiatives like that which I really recommend getting involved with and pushing and raising and talking to people at work about. But it's also about having conversations and talking about it more. And I think that's one of the things that has been good with Black Lives Matter coming up. It means that we're talking about it. A black gentleman said in one of the panel discussions I was at, look, I shouldn't always have to come to these panel discussions and talk about this. I'm keen that, you know, white folk are talking about this as well. And so whether it's whatever area of diversity it is, and I think Steve made that point really well as well, I'm probably least at the top of the list to be talking about it because I'm a white male. But if I'm not talking about it, who else is? So just talking about it is really, really good.
Okay.
I absolutely.
We've recently had a number of sessions within Boots where again we've got a business resource group for your people who are a part of, and they've recently been going out and just holding talking sessions where they've been going into teams, inviting a bunch of people along to a session and just encouraging the conversation. I think that the problem for me is that, you know, we've said it a couple of times, if it's not talked about, you know, it's just assumed that everything is okay. And somebody said something to me a few weeks ago where, you know, it's not good enough anymore to, you know, to not be racist or to not be homophobic. You need to be anti-racist and anti-homophobic. And I think that's something we should all take to heart. That, you know, it's our own individual responsibility to go out there and to correct the wrongs of society. And we can only do that by talking amongst ourselves and raising the profile.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that obviously as like a mixed race female, I can't actually personally say that I feel that it's ever gone against my favour. I actually feel that it's always been in my favour to be within the, you know, the IT community and be sort of technically focused. I feel that actually it's probably helped me in some way. I do speak to other females in the industry though that have struggled, and And I think that, you know, even in 5 years' time, considering the exposure that technology and sciences are given to children these days and younger people, and that real drive that we're seeing, I do think that diversity and recruitment, you know, within the diverse areas will be much easier. But I think that, you know, probably particularly in the leadership space, I think that obviously at the point in time where leaders have been educated and gone through their career, you know, it wasn't at a time whereby there was a lot of females, you know, in technology, or females particularly. I think even when I was at uni, there was only probably about 6 women in the course out of 200. So I think that we'll absolutely see an increase, and I know that certainly from my perspective, absolutely driving that within NSFL, and it's something that's really high on our agenda, to drive that sort of women in tech and that diversity element as well. But you know, I think it's sad that we're still having to have these conversations, but ultimately I think that, you know, the right people are on board in terms of driving that forward, which is really good to hear.
Excellent, good stuff. Thank you very much, everyone. And Taya, just to stay with yourself, we had a question while you were talking. Have you ever had imposter syndrome, and how have you overcome it? If you have.
Yeah, actually, I have, to be honest. I think that I had it quite badly probably before I started this role, and I think when I compared my jump from Virgin Money to Home Group, that was quite a large jump. And in some ways, I probably didn't realise what I was walking into as much. But I think that with this role, because I knew the sheer scale of it, and I knew what I'd achieved at Home Group, and that was on a much smaller level. I think, you know, that I think it's really natural to have that. And there was a lot of me which is like, oh, you know, can I do this role? Am I cut out for it? But, you know, I think that I've been in a very fortunate position whereby the last 2 roles I've been in, they've been brand new roles. So I've very much been able to shape them in the way that I see fit and appropriate. And like I said in my introduction, I think it's really important to get involved in as much stuff as you can, even if it's outside of your remit. So in terms of overcoming it, I think it's just a case of believing in yourself. And when you actually go into that organisation, the first couple of weeks, absorbing as much information as possible, you know, talking to as many people as possible, really start to identify those opportunities quickly, any risks. And in all honesty, you're going into a new organisation, so if you don't know something, you have to ask, and you have to seek that clarity, and you shouldn't be nervous or worried about asking what might be deemed as silly questions, because if you're thinking it, then everyone else has probably thought it in the past and they're joined as well. So that'll probably be my advice there.
Great, thank you very much. And now a question from Taya for the rest of the panel. What would you say you are most passionate about within your roles as they are at the moment?
I think I would say, and probably always, people. I love it. I love the people stuff. I love the building. I want to be part of a team. I have a need to be part of a team. I don't want to be on my own. So I build a team underneath me, and it's purely selfish. I just want it. So I build it. But I love dealing with people. I love the empowerment, people stepping beyond what they thought they could do, you know, kind of that whole piece. I absolutely adore that. So that's probably my top thing.
So I think for me, it's about the opportunity to raise the quality of the technology that we're working with. I've come into a tech stack that is quite old, quite legacy, quite brownfield, and we're modernising that, moving it to Azure, building out a new React front end of the boots.com website, and doing lots of cool stuff. And I think for me, it's about the opportunity of showing to an organisation that maybe hasn't always embraced what really good quality engineering can do, what good quality engineering is all about, and what that can really do to revolutionize business. So that's kind of where I am. But I also agree with Louise totally. You can't do that without a team. So the people that surround me, I love every one of my team. It's amazing to be working with them, and I wouldn't have it any other way.
So Taya alluded to it in her talk when she talked about risks and opportunities, and Steve just mentioned opportunities there as well. And for me, it's not just the immediate opportunities, but the opportunities that you can create and grow in together. So I'm literally just 2 weeks into my new job, so I should probably talking out of turn here, but just working out how one of my parts of my role is how can we better service NHS Digital as an organisation technically. So within that, there's tons of dreams about platforms, data, and how we can even maybe model products around that to be able to deliver something that's so powerful and useful. And already they've got some incredible systems. So if you look into, there's a system in the NHS called Spine, and it's kind of a lot of press about it. So please do read about it. Incredible what it does. But building platforms for the future is something that really excites me. That's super exciting.
Great, thank you very much. And possibly common thread that runs through everything. We had a question that was sent in. Did you all have a mentor at one point in your careers, or have one currently? And how important do you think the role of a mentor is in, you know, where you are today and where you want to be? If we start that one off with Taya.
So this is one thing that I always advise my my team, my direct reports, is to get a mentor. And I think that sometimes actually utilising a mentor in a different industry is quite helpful, because you get a completely different perspective on some, you know, maybe some similar shared challenges that you might have. You get a different perspective on it. I actually haven't had a mentor before, and I'm actually looking for a mentor. So if anyone knows anyone, Louise maybe could be a good opportunity. I think that, you know, it's very important to have a mentor, and really important to build those key relationships with, you know, the rest of the management team as well, if you can. I think that's incredibly important. So yes, absolutely go and get a mentor.
So I really encourage having a mentor, but before you do, there's one question that I think you should ask yourself. Why do I want a mentor? Is it to shift your mindset and to develop a new way of thinking? And Louise kind of touched on it in terms of a domain area. So that's another one. So do you want to change your thinking and mature that? Do you want to learn a domain area, or do you want to learn a particular skill? And there's 3 types of mentorship. So that will greatly affect who you go out to try and find who that mentor might be, and have an idea of what you want to get out of that relationship. For me, it was about the mindset, and I had this Japanese mentor, and we used to, he speaks pretty good English, but we'd always speak in Japanese, and he would have these just crazy ways of thinking about things. So when there was an incident at work, he's like, Richardo-san, all these people, when there's an incident at work, they go off to their computers, they fire up their IDs, they open up their terminals, and they start typing away. And I look at them, Richard, and I say, I'm confused. I'm confused why they're doing that. What I do is I'll go to the bathhouse, I'll sit in the hot springs with a wet towel on my head, and I'll think about the problem. And within an hour, it will always come. And then I'll just go back home and fix it. And it was just like this whole different way of thinking that was really worth hearing, just these golden nuggets. So please do bear that in mind when you go and seek out who your mentor might be, or who you might want to mentor as well.
I'm always dread this question, because the answer is that until recently I've never had nor wanted a mentor. But I think they're hugely powerful for people. And, you know, if it's something you think would be useful, I utterly encourage people to do it. I have mentored other people, and that's been really interesting for me. And actually, I grow a lot whenever I mentor somebody. I learn much more about myself and some of my approaches to things as well. So it's a really great learning experience. I think the reason I've never really sought out a mentor is I'm really internally referenced. And what I mean by that is, if I was to ask you, are you good at your job? And you reply yes or no, then you're probably internally referenced. If you, because it's your own opinion. I guess if I say, how do you know? And you say, well, such and such tells me, and I got this feedback, and you know, these guys are sort of telling me that what I'm doing is good in that area, then you're really externally referenced. You're interested in what other people are saying about you. Whereas if you just say, it's a weird question, I just know, I do a good job, I go in there, and that's who I am. So I'm really internally referenced. And I think that's probably why I've never really reached out to a mentor. I think it would probably be valuable for me, and it's probably something I need to think about. As I mentioned earlier, I have recently started the reverse mentoring at work. And I think that's going to be really uncomfortable and really interesting for me. So I'm looking forward to doing that.
So I've already put my answer into the chat. I've had many mentors over the years and would strongly encourage it. I've always taken the approach of trying to align myself with people that are maybe in positions that maybe I want to get to, or in spaces that I find interesting or want to learn something about. But I think the point that Richard was making about there being different types of mentors is really valid, and actually something I've never really considered before, and maybe something I should. But yeah, absolutely. Use LinkedIn, go find a mentor. Somebody's put in the chat there, how do you find a mentor? And my approach has always been to go onto LinkedIn, reach out to people that maybe you don't know. Just go and introduce yourself. Go to a conference and find a speaker or somebody that you find interesting, and just go and spark up a conversation. If you ask them if they'll act as a mentor for you, maybe they'll say no, maybe they'll say yes, maybe you'll have a couple of meetings and nothing else will happen. Doesn't matter. If you don't ask, then you don't get. So you just go out and have those conversations. And I think generally you find, especially in the tech community, people are so open to having conversations and seeing how they can help you out.
Excellent, great stuff there, guys. And one from Jen here. What challenges should you expect in the first 3 months in a dev manager role when the IT department is in the middle of a digital transformation program and the dev team is in a state of flux? I'm not sure if Jen's asking for a friend or if that's a question for herself, but who'd like to take this one? Go ahead, Louise.
Okay, so yeah, that sounds fun. Can I do it? No. There's going to be a lot of challenges in that situation. Absolutely. The dev team might hate what's being done to them by the sounds of it. The organization might hate IT. Most do when you first go in that type of scenario. It's all about relationship building. It's all about building your credibility, listening to what the concerns are, and really addressing them. So not necessarily stopping, but actually really listening to people, then knowing you've got their backs. At one organization I worked at, I was told by one person, they told me when I first started that they had asked for a change from IT before they went on maternity leave, and their son was now 10 years old. That was telling me they did not like IT, and they just would refuse to even raise any requests for us. And it took me 3 years, but I worked on that relationship. And by the end of it, she was singing our praises and she was asking for things. And that for me was the measure as to whether or not we'd done a good job, was that she actually was putting requests in. So really it's about just being utterly respectful, really going in, working with people. Every single person there has a valid opinion and feeling.
I think it's about building that trust as well with the members of the team. And naturally they're going to be feeling quite concerned and quite worried. And by building that relationship, it allows you to, make those viable recommendations as to how they can handle this change. So I can imagine it would be a very unsettling time. I also think it would be good to kind of map out the impact that this change in the organisation is going to have on the department, and what your what your predictions are around that, and actually how can you make some decisions now which might reduce the impact, or how can you start having those key conversations with your team which might prepare them for that as well?
I think for me, there's an element of making yourself available and accountable. So, I think that when I went into new roles, and quite often you might have to make difficult decisions or do things that aren't particularly popular, but actually you're having that open and frank conversation with the team and saying, hey, look, this is what we're doing. This is the reason why we're doing it. I also don't necessarily think it's a bad thing to give your own opinion of it, because especially in larger organizations, and we've just been through this recently at Boots, there are a bunch of decisions that are being made, and some of the decisions I don't agree with myself, but I'm having to implement them because that's what the organization's doing. So I don't think there's a problem with you're saying that to your team. I don't particularly agree with this, but this is why the organization is doing it. I've asked the question of people around me, and this is the reason I've been given why we need to do it. Therefore, that's where we are. And just making your team aware that, as you said, Taya, that you've got their backs, that you're willing to stand up for them, and that you're gonna be the do the best you can for every individual, and if they have concerns, be approachable and let people come to you.
Excellent. Richard, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, so I think, first of all, don't panic, and don't stress. And I think there's a certain amount of accountability, as Steve mentioned, but at the same time, knowing that actually transformation projects are really hard. They're really painful. They do send things into a state of flux by their nature, just because they can become so challenging mentally. And I don't know how long the transformation project is. Is it a year or two? But we've seen anywhere between a year and 3 years. And some industry experts recommend that you only go through such transformation projects maybe once in your career, because they do take their toll on you mentally. But if you can relax and find what you enjoy within that situation, whether it be the people, whether it be the team, the teamwork, hold on to that and realize there might be crazy stuff going around about you. If you imagine being in a lifeboat in a storm, it's not much fun. But I think that's my analogy of some of the hairy transformation projects I've been in. But if you can stay in that boat with those team members as long enough to get to the other side, then you'll look back and say, wasn't that great, we did it. And so I really encourage you just to stand strong, keep peaceful inside, and hold on to who you are.
Great advice there. Thank you, Richard. And as we run out of time, I'll ask one more question. We'll fire through the remaining ones into the Slack channel. Link will be sent out by James following, and there'll be access to the speakers from today's talk as well. But the final question from Manila for each panelist: what is the best piece of career advice you've ever been given, and what would you tell your younger self if you could now? Sorry, Steve, start us off.
So I would say for me, it's probably believe in yourself. I think especially in the early part of my career, or I guess I'm still in some people's books. I guess I'm still in the early part of my career. But at the very start of my career, I had a lot of big ambitions and big dreams, and there were a lot of people around me who said you can do this and just believe in yourself. And I still continue to remind myself of that every day. That I might not be going to the destination that I thought I was going to, but I will ultimately get to the destination I want to get to if I believe in myself.
I think for me, it would probably be just sort of going back to my introduction, it would be similar to Steve, really, believe in yourself and aim high. I think that you have to have that element of self-belief. You have to be headstrong in the fact that you believe in your own abilities, and don't be put off by job adverts, and like I said, if it says 5 years plus experience, if you've only got 2, go for it. The worst that's going to happen is that you're going to get a no, or you're not going to get a response at all. But I think that it's always better to go for something. Ultimately, every job or new role that you go for, there is going to be elements of it that you've not done before and you can't do, because essentially it's likely to be a step up in your career. So it's about learning and developing yourself. So absolutely, just believe in yourself, aim high, and go for it. And I think that I would probably tell my younger self the same thing, just not to worry. And in these situations when you do have that element of self-doubt, or as we spoke about, that element of kind of a bit of imposter syndrome, not to do so. I think, you know, an element of that is natural, but you must believe in your own skills and abilities.
Brilliant, thank you, Taya. Louise?
So I think the only piece of career advice I can ever remember getting, given that I don't really listen to many people when they're talking to me and trying to advise me about my career, as I mentioned earlier, was from my dad. And he told me, don't go and do electronic engineering at university, go and study genetics, because that's where the fun is going to be. And he was right, that would have been super fun. But obviously I didn't actually even take his advice. But I think if I was going to speak to my younger self, I think I'd say just enjoy it. Take all the opportunities, go out there and enjoy it. And it just doesn't matter. It does not matter what level you reach. It does not matter. Once you earn a certain amount of money, you don't need to earn more money. You can, and that's lovely, but you don't need it. You know, there is a level that you do need, but beyond that, you don't need it. So enjoy your job. Do not put up with a job you don't like. As Richard was saying earlier, if you hate your spreadsheets and you hate your budgeting and you've got a job where that's a lot of what you're doing, don't do it. Take a job on less money. Find something that's fun and do that.
For me, I don't think I've had much career advice given to me, or maybe I should have been listening more. But I think the thing that I tell my younger self is find a role model. I think a mentor is good, but they're hard to find good mentors, but don't let that stop you finding one. But you can very easily have a role model. So at the moment, I've got a role model, a charity that I'm on the committee for, and he's a retired accountant. But he comes and does the accounts at this committee. And I'm like, why are you so amazingly level-headed, so reasonable, so lovely and good with people? I'd like to be like you. And so that's something that I can apply to my life, even if it's not directly related to my current employment. So definitely get a role model.
Thank you very much. And I'd just like to say thank you again to all of our panelists for giving up their time, and thank you for those in attendance. These events are driven by the community, they're for the community, so we're open to suggestions as to what people would like to hear next. Feel free to reach out to James, Matt or myself, but we'll bring it to a close. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Yes,
Bye.
bye.